Okay, I'm going to pause it right here. Point Reyes National Park Service. This takes me back. This has already been years. Time flies, huh? When they sent out a public message about why the public shouldn't try to help the elk because they might not take care of the water troughs properly. This is a trough, ladies and gentlemen. Believe it or not, that's a trough. Not only is it a trough, it's one of the troughs right next to Pierce Point Ranch, meaning it's one of the most publicly accessible and seen troughs that were put out for the elk. Once we shamed them into putting out the trough that they fought in court not to put out. But what we're looking at are non-native species, silage species. We got, I think that's mostly radish, maybe some mustard mixed in there. If you zoom in, you see some wall barley. And this is what happens when ranches are adjacent to an elk reserve. The problem plants that are associated with ranchers make their way in. And Point Reyes, which was mandated upon being found to preserve and restore natural resources, has done the opposite. They have just allowed the exploitation of that land by ranchers and have failed miserably to actually bring Point Reyes back to where Point Reyes could be. And one of the reasons that that is the case is that not only are the park staff not doing the restoration that they should be doing, they're allowing and even advocating for ranchers continuing to plant non-native species for the sake of their cattle, for their commodity animals, for their non-native, non-ecological, have nothing to do with their surroundings cattle. But hey, glad everybody enjoys cream and beef. Let's keep going. That's a water trough. Oh, Point Reyes National Park Service. You keep the standards high, don't you? There we go. There's a better shot, more zoomed in. And there you can more clearly see the bristly wall barley, a grain agricultural plant brought over from Europe, and the mustard and radish. Gosh, if you're going to let nature take over the troughs, one would like to think that at least you would promote native plants. And what else does this tell you? This tells you about the behavior, the characteristics of these plants. They tend to be the ones that take over areas. Otherwise, why wouldn't we have seen native plants take over that area? It's a problem. Help is required at this point. Humans need to lend a helping hand since they spent so long lending a hurting hand. By the way, all of this was provided by an ally in the field. This is from June 6th. Here's South Pond 2. Man, on June 6th. And California has dry summers. I can't imagine this looks any better. And this is one of our better years. Frightening as that is. But what we're getting to here is this shot. We are going to see cattle, beef cattle, commodity animals, as they move into the elk reserve. I'm going to pause it for a second because if any of you are paying close attention, you may have looked at the land and said, oh, that doesn't look that bad. It's all relative, right? But indeed, it doesn't look that bad compared to most of the ranch land out there. And why? Because this is not heavily ranched. This is not heavily grazed. This is a transition from ranch land that has kind of been phased out before you get to the elk reserve. So the contrast between healthy, green, perennial plants that are supposed to be here in California, and then that fence, and then just utter, complete desolation, which is ranch land, isn't as distinct in some areas, such as this one, where you can see like some of that native coastal brush, which the ranchers, by the way, are all condemning as a problem. Oh my God, the native plants are returning. Stop it. Anyway, here is a non-native commodity animal, which outweighs an elk by about 1,000 pounds if you need some perspective on the size of these commodity animals that exist just to get big and be killed. Have nothing to do with nature whatsoever. Anyway, let me pull this back up. There's the elk fence. You can kind of make it out. It's right along the line where it does become quite obvious. But the point I'm making is that you actually do see some coyote brush mixed in on the right side of the screen, where for the most part it's obviously worse, in my opinion, worse. Well, scientifically, factually, everything happening on the left is supposed to be happening. So it's beyond an opinion. That's good from the perspective of nature. Anyway, that is the elk fence, and cattle are at the elk fence and looking for a way in. And why not? Hey, I'd be looking for better forage as well. This is Kehoe North, and we panned back just a little bit. I want everybody to look at everything in the foreground. That is primarily wall barley, non-native species. You just see that things are kind of mowed down. It looks worse than this now as summer goes on. It's going to be more desolate looking. Apparently this is what we're celebrating, and this is what we need cattle for. Oh, these people who are stewards of the land and embrace nature, we also need them in order to fight nature back. Mental gymnastics required to support these people is beyond me. Anyway, we're panning. That's a collection of beef cattle there, and there's the elk reserve and the fence, and there is the guilty livestock animal. You can see the wall barley a little bit. Well, I don't know if you can. If you choose to zoom in, you can definitely see the wall barley in the foreground. And you can see how the elk fence meanders. That's the elk fence closest to us, with the cow right in the middle of the screen. And then on the horizon, you've got the elk fence also. Our ally in the field desires to remain anonymous. Otherwise, I'd be giving the person more obvious credit. So not really any debate left here. What you're looking at is a livestock commodity that found its way into the elk reserve thanks to the portion of fence that was removed. And that effort by the Park Service, what was that, back in November? That they took down a tiny section of the fence, and as soon as the rancher said, whoa, it came to a halt and has not proceeded since. That's the power of the ranchers. But the real issue here is that damage is being done to the elk reserve now. The Park Service are so irresponsible, so not on the scene, so not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and by the way, blatantly lie that they are doing it. They're not. This is something that they should be preventing, because commodity animals, livestock, destroy. They don't have a relationship with the environment. Therefore, their presence is negative. Whether it's the sweetest animal ever, and don't pretend that you care, because all you care about is it being on your plate. So please don't pretend that you care about how sweet the animal in this image is. It's hurting the habitat. Why? Because it's not part of that habitat. It has no ecological relationship with that habitat. And here we are panning back. There's the Pacific. There's a fence that I'm going to come back and look at.
All right, we got elk fencing in the distance. We've got cattle fencing up close, and whether it's for elk or cattle, it's all a problem. Some of it's old, some of it's new. This looks like brand new. And this brand new fencing is built next to the old posts that are still in the ground. Just keep adding stuff. Oh, God. This is Kehoe. This is all still Kehoe. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the park staff helped put up this fence. More habitat fragmentation. People act like the park was returned to nature. A lot of the media outlets were saying, oh, elk will now roam freely. Yes, with the exception of all the barbed wire that is still there and being added as we speak. And the fence that still hasn't come down.
Now look right here. See how confusing and complicated it gets? You actually do in the background have something that you could say is healthier looking. I would say it's healthier looking. How many people don't think that that greenery in the background, the perennial plants that stay green throughout the summer, despite the lack of water in California, who would say that that doesn't look better than what's in the foreground? And what's in the foreground is, in fact, what has been caused by the ranchers. I'm not kidding you when I tell you that simultaneously it's being promoted that we need the ranchers here in order to continue what you see in the foreground and avoid what you see in the background. All right, so there's the road, Pierce Point Road, right? And you see the cars. Why are the cars heading that direction? The cars are heading to the elk reserve. The cars, the tourists, the actual source of income, primary income, are on their way to see nature. They're driving past Kehoe and McClure and Lunny and all the other pieces of trash that destroy the planet for personal profit while telling you that they're doing you a favor. If you're dumb enough to believe that, I don't. You're just going to have to evolve on your own at some point in time. But anyway, the cars are heading out to actually enjoy the only parts of the park that are enjoyable, which are the parts that don't have ranchers. So let's continue the pan. And now we have a photograph. Let's make that bigger. Pretty clearly in that coastal scrub. As we've talked about on the live channel, sometimes people associate the word scrub with negativity. Like in sports, if you're scrub, then you're not good. That's not the case here. Scrub is a collection of different native plants that exist on the coastline that include, but are not limited to, coyote brush, which has been villainized, wrongly so. Yep, pretty clear. Now this is interesting. Here's one of the disgusting problems with Point Reyes National Seashore. You've got the elk fence, and then if you look closely, you also have another fence that is keeping the bovine that seems to be eating, the one on the right, pinned between that barbed wire fence and the elk reserve fence. And the one on the left, let me get my image off the screen. There's the lovely butt of that animal. That one is obviously in the elk reserve, and the evidence gets more clear in a minute, so don't worry about that. But just never-ending fencing, never-ending habitat fragmentation, never-ending entanglement, never-ending wire and barbs and rust. Yeah, I was hoping to be able to tell which plant was being consumed. I couldn't. Okay, so here is a shot. We're going to inside the elk reserve. And here's a pan down to what is a cow patty. How do you know it's a cow patty? Well, poop from ungulates in the wild doesn't look anything close to this. It's small, it's compact, it's pellet-like, even from animals like elk. And as Laura Cunningham explained to me, this is like a suffocating splat on the ground, rather than I tell you what, instead of me having to explain it to you, when something is that blatantly different, you need to explain why that doesn't set off an alarm in your head that, oh, okay, that is blatantly different than everything else. Maybe we should think about anything else associated with that difference instead of saying, oh, poop is poop. Poop is poop. Everything poops. It must be good. Panning over, we see where that bovine made its way deeper into the coyote brush. I'm going to pause it. Please look at the horizon. Look at these green, beautiful plants providing habitat, looking healthy, and then look in the distance. Now look at me. And I want you to answer. What do you think's happening? What do you think's happening there in the distance? Come on. You know the answer. You're afraid to say it. Or maybe you're on my side and you're gleefully saying it. What's happening in the distance? Well, all that death that you see, everything that is the opposite of what you see in front of you, what would be the naturally occurring habitat, the naturally occurring vegetation, you're seeing ranch land. You're seeing yellow. You're seeing exactly what I showed you earlier happens when ranchers are present. You have annuals. Annuals meaning they have a short life cycle and they die within a year. And within even that short life cycle, they turn yellow and dry and are ready to burn. They offer little in the form of carbon sequestration. They offer little in the form of food for wildlife or even shelter for wildlife. But cattle eat it, and that's all that matters. That's all that matters in the mind of ranchers, the stewards of the land, the people who care so much about nature. The only thing that matters is if their cattle eat it. And that's why you see so little of it in so much of California. The only places where you can find this, for the most part, are areas that were protected, preserved, where ranchers were removed, dating long time ago. Point Reyes National Seashore is certainly not the only place that this happened at. What makes Point Reyes National Seashore different is that they didn't leave. They were paid to leave and didn't. And now they've been paid to leave a second time, and they're kind of not going to leave again. And even though they took the money and participated in the secret negotiations, while even people like me didn't know about these negotiations, it's being labeled as some sort of evil, dark thing that the hippies did, even though the ranchers were actually the ones who were participating in it. Anyway, look at the death. Look at the death in the background. Look at the dry nothingness. Look at the yellow. That's what ranch land looks like. And be honest, that's what California looks like. That's what California looks like by far and large. An abused, exploited, raped biological hotspot because people wanted to turn California into a feedlot. Oh, I'm sorry. Grazing land. Grazing land. Remember, these are grass-fed animals. You know, the future of the planet. Grass-fed. Fucking idiots. Again, because this was filmed early enough and because it was a wet enough year, not all of the annuals that are in the foreground have turned fully yellow, but you can see that they're well on their way compared to the perennials, which are going to stay nice and green and living all year long. All right, and more wonders of the ranchers. Just neglected fence posts, rusted barbed wire, entanglement. Is this fence, in fact, doing anything? Is it serving a purpose? I'd love to take some bets right now. I'd love people to put their money where their mouths are. What say you? Is this just one of the many fences that the ranchers lazily said, fuck it? You know, the people that are stewards of the land. That's pretty much their approach. Fuck it. The amount of barbed wire coils and crap I found out there will blow your mind. Anyway, you got more of that ugly yellow shit brought over by the ranchers from Europe. Their fence posts, some of it in complete disarray, some of it just partially rusted out. And these weeds, these European weeds, have different timelines. So amongst them, you do have some that are green at this very moment. And that would be the thistles that are that cluster in the middle. Let me blow up the screen. And that looks like Italian thistle. If I could venture a guess from this distance. And it is also going to be yellow and dry and flammable within probably a month and a half from this shot. And I'm very familiar with the plant. I fight with it every year. And it's not going to go that route before it disperses about a bazillion seeds into the air, helping spread the non-native plants into the elk reserve, which the Point Reyes National Park Service has done absolutely nothing to prevent, as I have said already. It's just a better shot of the dilapidated state of this fence. The barbed wire rust, the yellow flammable plants, everything negative that you see here is thanks to ranchers, thanks to the so-called stewards of the land. Now, I'm going to call out Bay Denatured Magazine, Bay Nature Magazine, once again, for having the audacity to publish something that said that things were going to go to shit when the ranchers leave. This is what it looks like with the ranchers there. Oh boy. God forbid nature might come back and replace all of this. God forbid we remove the barbed wire. I'm being repetitive, but I got to drive home. You see the wall barley at the base of that wooden fence. Real nice, Kehoe. Yep, and that's where another trough was, and the Park Service, the park staff removed it. Let's look at what's surrounding that. Why is that funny? I can see on the right we've got some yellow bush lupin, the bright yellow, and just about everything else that is in that disturbed area where the Park Service went in is non-native plants, annuals. A lot of it is silage. A lot of it is the grain plants. So, cattle started taking advantage of the opening in the fence almost immediately. The person who sent this to me said he saw a strange lack of elk. Hopefully, they've moved on to better spots, but God only knows. We do have studies that show that elk disperse when cattle are in the area. The ranchers will lie blatantly to you and try to tell you that the elk are all violent and chase the cattle and gore the cattle. It's not true. It is the cattle who displace the elk. So now perhaps cattle or livestock, I should say, are displacing elk in the reserve while destroying the reserve, while eating native vegetation in the reserve, while trampling the reserve. We're seeing in an area that had a chance to recover what happened upon first European contact, bringing over their livestock and bringing an end to a system that had worked for thousands of years. Just bringing an end to a system that worked for thousands of years because the wrong plants and animals were introduced. The person who sent me the footage also noted seeing cow patties in the seeps, some of the few water sources that are in the elk reserve, and now they're being contaminated with cows pooping in them, something that wildlife don't do, but livestock do. Yeah.